Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and this video is a companion video to my sling loop that I've designed for the DartZone Aeon Pro, which I am selling on Cults 3D. If you're considering buying or have already bought my sling loop, you can feel free to go ahead to these time signatures, because that's the relevant part for you to get a good print and fit this correctly. For everyone else, let's go through the long-winded way. This is the DartZone Aeon Pro, which is exceptionally popular, even though there are very few games running since this was released. It has, however, been noted by several people that this is missing a sling loop. We have the rail and some holes at the front that we can maybe attach something to. However, at the back, to have a corresponding sling loop, there's nothing at all. And so I took this thing apart and had a look to see what I could come up with.
So the first thing for me to do is to work out where in the shell there was enough space to mount my sling loop design. I had originally wanted to put it in the top back corner of the shell. Unfortunately, I quickly found that the sear catch and the air cylinder are pretty much tightly packed in there and there's very little space. Where there is a lot of space is in the grip, and so I went for a sling loop that fits inside the grip. Then I went through the 3D modelling process, which, if you're interested, I have 2 live streams on that. Essentially, I made a block to act as an anchor that fits over some of the screw ports inside the grip, and a loop that would stick out and you'd have to cut some holes in the shell of the grip for that to come through. That's it. It's not particularly in-depth or difficult part to make. But even so, I went through a few design iterations. I printed out 3 or 4 of them just to make sure I had it exactly how I wanted it. Then I made some plates to go over the top so that if you cut a messy hole, you could cover that up and make it look a little neater. So let's have a look at how to print these things. And the sling loop itself is supplied in this orientation, and I'm pretty sure that that's the best way to print it. What this means is that the layer lines run through the entire part from the top anchor all the way to the bottom of the sling loop, which means that it's very strong. This does require just a little bit of support material underneath, but that's just 10 seconds with a file to get rid of that. For the covers, I had originally thought that this would be the best orientation to print. However, there's very little surface area actually touching the print bed, as you see here, and so they were peeling very regularly, even with a very generous brim, or even with a raft. And so I experimented with this instead, which is a very odd way to print this part, and as you see here, does use quite a bit of support material. However, when printed in this orientation, these parts come out perfectly for me, and so I would recommend trying this. For me, with my settings, this is a 2-hour print, which is of course massively varying depending on your printer, your settings, and 1,000 different things therein. But 1 hour to 3 hours is probably what you should be expecting. But now that we can get our parts printed, let's look at how they fit. There are 4 screws in the Aeon Pro's grip and the Nexus Pro. If you wish, you can then simply press the sling loop into the grip and cut away where it lines up. A little hole there on both sides. However, to make that a little bit easier, you can hold these guides over the bottom of the grip. Note that if you have the wrong one on, or the wrong way fitted, that it will overlap one side and not on the other. And if you have the correct one fitted, then it will line up front and back relatively well. We can then take some sort of pen or pencil or scribing tool and draw into each of the slots, which is coming out wonderfully well on video, I'm sure, with all this dark colours. So now we have these 2 U-shaped lines, and when we cut out the space on the inside of that with the Dremel, that will then let us fit the sling loop and have a nice neat edge to it. So now we can set about cutting to those lines. If you've used a pencil, you probably have to cut over the lines, where if you've used a proper scribing tool or perhaps a needle, you can probably get away with cutting very close to the lines. As you see here, I'm being very careful with my cutting and I'm test fitting repeatedly along the way. If you're using the covers, this is probably unnecessary because you can make a really messy cut and then the cover will cover that up. I'm also holding the Dremel in such a way that if it catches, it will push the Dremel away from me and not towards me, so safety first. And to show you what they would look like fitted, here is my Aeon Pro on top and my Nexus Pro underneath. And as you can see, my cuts are not particularly neat, but when the covers go on, that will hide that nicely. And finally, here's what it looks like with the cover fitted as well. Neatens up any messy cuts you've got and should fit nicely with the base of the grip. So I wanted to pop outside quickly to show off some of the ways that this could possibly be used. And the first of those ways is as a one-point sling. What this does is it lets you sling it at your side, you have your hands free to do other things. It is somewhat loose, as one-point slings tend to be, but that's probably okay for most people. It does also give you the ability to shoot while it's attached. And if you see, I've attached some string up at the top, and so if I attach it there, this is not the sort of thing that I expect people to be using regularly. This string is just to show off kind of how it works. So with the sling loop at the top, it can then be hung like this, or even pointed straight downwards. This does still have a little bit of wobble, maybe slightly less than a one-point setup, but not by much. However, it does still give me the ability to shoot with it still attached. I think of these options, the most practical setup is as a one-point sling, or sort of a lanyard that I can throw onto my back. Well, you'd be happy to know that that's all I have to say about what is essentially just a loop. I've somehow managed to make a 10-minute video about this, but there it is. I really rather like making videos. I just wish I was good at it. I should point out that this part also fits the Nexus Pro, and actually this has completely changed the way that I sling the Nexus Pro, and this is basically permanent now. So if you are interested in this part, check out the link in the description. For everyone else, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.